So the Vaurasians were ship traveling people. They used river ships, things they could pull as sleds if they had horses with them. And they navigated the Dnieper rivers and the Volga, the Volga. And so they ended up, there were families that were scattered there. You could think of it as like a Scandinavia, like a proto-Scandinavia. They were sort of scattered. But then certain harbors or places where they had to maybe winter or change or dismount for the purposes of a sled pulling type of situation, that there would be settlements there. People would say, well, I'll just see how I'll try my luck this season. And sometimes they were there, remained there, and sometimes they were overrun like the Indians in the Old West. You had somewhat of a, you could call it colonization, but there were no nations. There were just migrating peoples and tribes and nomads and travelers and traders and workers associated with that business model, which did have a lot of shipping involved in it, a lot of transportation, also a lot of security. You had people not just carrying goods, but also a couple of bowmen, perhaps more than a couple, whatever the word was, out on the line, how much heat you needed to bring with you. And in fact, there were some years and some centuries where it was impassable due to military operations of the day, which involved a whole lot of horses and a whole lot of Mongols. So that was the disruption from ancient times. That's what disturbed or created a discontinuity in those parts, and yet also you have to realize they were more or less dispersed, low population areas relatively speaking, especially in modern terms. At this moment, how many billions of people are we up to? 9 billion already? What is the number? Nobody probably knows. A couple of countries do lie about or are incapable of accurately estimating their populations because they're just completely out of control at this time. This was not always the case, although some version of that did take place regionally, and yet because there were no borders, there was no security, there was no regulations, no nothing, these migratory flocks of people would spread out and start taking what they could take, including land to feed themselves, or pasture land for which they could run their cattle or livestock. So just like bigger herds of cattle grow over time, a certain centralization in their populations took place, which was weaponized. And there is strength in numbers, and so 1,000 to 100 of them roll in. There's maybe, let's say, 50 of you. Some old people, some women, some kids. How strong are your defenses? Well, those are the people that were captured and tortured in famous ways. Makes crucifixion look like a civilized way to go. So these were not civilized places and not civilized times, and you can imagine types of people that then evolutionarily adapted to such conditions, even in the sense of planning some type of defense in depth against the possibility of all different types of outside threats. To put it another way, just be completely paranoid about everybody at every time for everything. And so that hostile environment carries over to a hostile mentality, which then goes over from self-defense to offense, because they feel it's like offensive self-defense. They're in that type of mental state. And then they start just misidentifying threats. Like, what? This is my neighbor who is trying to kill me, so I better punch him in the face before he punches me type of thinking. Like, that's the level of crazy we're talking about. So there's a rationality to it, but ultimately it's an irrational response to threat perception. So sort of overestimating the underhandedness of the other party, because you yourself are into underhandedness, because those are the rules that you just accept as being worldly rules. Like, everybody will say this or that, but this is how it really works, buddy. Let me show you. But what if that way isn't skillful? Yeah, most likely it's not. Just like over-perceiving or projecting pathologies onto other people. So, and there's also a grayscale that someone would say, oh, I'm not doing that. Well, you're doing it too. There's probably a gray area between you being an outrageous, despotic person who's out of their mind and maybe just halfway there with ill will, misperception, projection of defilements that beam out of your eyes and splash back in your face. Because you eat the plate that you prepare. Even if you offer, I didn't offer that plate. I didn't order that plate, miss. Or mister. It's not my plate, that's your plate. You thought it was prepared for me. I didn't accept it. So that's it. This is on the level of metaphysics. Wishing someone, oh, well, that's yours. That's your bag. You filled it up with that. Now it's yours. How do you feel now? Can you add some more to the bag? Can it just keep filling up like a garbage bag full of defilement? Is that skillful? Perhaps you're misperceiving how reality works in spiritual matter. Oh no, there's no reality to spiritual matters. It's all humbug. On to the next thing. So wise. These skeptics and doubters and questioners really know it all, don't they? Or perhaps they're wearing those big thick glasses of delusion instead. Or have they answered the question of life? Is it to just despise people who have multidimensionality, that recognize that the subjective has more of a precedence than one cinder block stacked on top of another? No, that's not what a worldly person would say. A worldly person is just solely occupied with worldly concerns. Hmm. How many worldly concerns have spiritual dimensions to them? If people are indeed living in a spiritual dimension, not just a material one. You'll see at that moment you could drop a spoon on the floor and everybody is quiet because they know it's true. But just because they know it's true doesn't mean they're going to put it into practice. And that's where academics lose the script, or the script loses them. Just keep on driving on down the road. Nothing in the tank, but foot on the gas. Blazing into the desert of the absurd. But what is the Varangian model? Well, the Varangian model is the encompassing of the peoples in those places, in those regions, into a new government model that's based on the Rada, and also some old Polish models. But I did hear the old Polish model was defunct. There was a really stupid clause that anybody could shut down any type of law for any reason, and it was misused to undermine the government, which kept it purposefully weak and messed up, which ultimately led to an easier assimilation by the counterparties. So getting a governmental body right is really important. One wrong step, and you got a bunch of dunces that don't know how to change the system they're stuck in, even to save their own lives. And so all of the tragedy, just think of all of the tragedy that Poland suffered in recent hundreds of years based on the type of people that were too enfeebled to redraft their governmental model that had an obvious fatal shortcoming. So if you're thinking about being ignoramus in these days, a nincompoop and a coward, just think what the weight of the bad causality will be put upon you by history if you fail. On the other hand, again, it's wonderful being a scientist because you can look at it like you would look at an automobile motor. Here we have the Mercedes-Benz with a wonderful diesel engine. This is the make and model. It's a classic. It's been driven hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The thing is bulletproof. It works. It's elegant. It's efficient. It has amazing power. It's just a technical miracle. And then that's you take some derivative of that, but it's not. For example, it's not perfect. There's this one use. You don't need that for a smaller application, for example. That would be inappropriate. So you don't need the overpowered thing. You could just have a simple system instead that doesn't require a lot of maintenance, but perhaps does include maintenance into the functioning of the program, which is, say, a review committee somewhere. The House of Lords sort of was supposed to function like this before it was trashed out. But be that as it may, that's just what's happened in our modern times. It withstood many centuries. And of course, not always well. That you can now look at the people involved, and you can also look at their schemes. Because they're dead, nobody cares about the truth. And so you can look at it. This is how they did it back then. Quite similar to how they do it today. It's just taken on grotesque forms. Also because of more of geopolitics came into it. So what is beyond belief, what these people have implemented in our day, is only beyond belief if you assume that you're dealing with people of your own kind. But if you realize that it's possibly the actions of a hostile outside foreign group, well, makes sense. They don't care. Less of you, more of them, better for them. They have no regard for your life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness, nothing whatsoever. So people can live under false pretexts of rah-rah-rahism to their own detriment if they're not paying attention. A lot of people are slaves to ill will, which is, I preach, the liberation from it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So protect yourself. Stop being so naive. That's this. We're in a time period of anthropological tropes. So you need to back up, reverse, right? Return to things that work and start looking around. Looking at sing-songy people in more of a suspicious way, because it's an act, because the results don't jive with the jive. So, and again, with breakdown of security, you get exposed to these people, but on the other hand, these soft attempts at a rollover, they can roll on by, unless they try to make it a hard one, and then it's, it's pretty apparent at that point what you're dealing with. Which is a relief in a lot of ways, but on the other hand, you shouldn't have been around them a long time ago. Because what's wholesome about that? But Varangianism, yeah. So commonality of peoples and a commonality of governmental forms, and then a historical analysis for the weak points. Take the good points of this Rada, leave all of the bad points of the 1917 travesty, and it's on to the next model, which is slimmed down and quick and functional and really good for future generations. That will be extremely prosperous, but in a real way. Not just in digits or in productivity metrics. Varangianism. Varangianism. I recently watched a discussion of a book publishing, and it was presumably in a library or a bookstore, and it was conducted by two English gentlemen. Or I don't know if we can use that word today, but it was an elderly retired judge who had done some reading. He knew about the 14th century and 15th century. It was a rather profound knowledge of historical occurrences. But when it came to the question of pressing current topics, it just seemed to be very vague, very detached. And it occurred to me, where are I had to ask myself the question, where are these people coming from? Where do they live? Like, in what type of reality do they live? So in this particular case, I would say completely detached reality, and a very, very, very comfortable one in which they don't feel like they will be ejected from it because they're socially and financially entrenched in a system that is completely detached from basic security questions, basic economic questions, basic social questions. And so there's almost the sense that they feel like the more trouble other people have, the better they feel. And so if some policy that causes a whole bunch of people a lot of problems that they don't have, that's some one up for them, that makes them even feel more comfortable and more detached, and more assured that their positioning is more advantageous for them personally. So it's amazing to watch them, just how comfortable they are during this time of total insensibility regarding political and strategic and economic decision making, which is more or less non-existent, or tending downwards towards a lot of worse conditions for a lot more people, and has been doing so since. When did it start in the UK? Someone will have to pipe up. Certainly Thatcherism. They were real big on Thatcherism. They came out with hitting the drums about Thatcherism for until I think about maybe a year ago. They stopped parading her around as some type of icon of success, just because some underling, maybe some runner or someone said that, oh, you know what, your lordship, she's completely discredited in this day and age. It doesn't, if you say that, polls suggest that you come across as a complete fool. It negatively affects public perception, sir. So, what? That's where I made all my money, by investing in the waterworks that pumps out sewage in places all across the country. All the waterways are filled with fecal matter. So, what to do with these people? What to really do with people like that? I would say you need to change your perceptions first. That see them for what they are. They're detached, they're comfortable, and they're not people you should run to either ask questions or look for solutions. I think if we go into pondering what, for example, if we have such economic conditions where we identify that $330 million or pounds a day are extorted out of the economy during a time period where you had anyone in responsible positions, that type of crime could also be attributed to them in some way. Say you were in the government at that time, make an explanation. You're now required to make a testimony. What were you doing? What didn't you do? How was your day? How did you go about your day? You say you came into the office 8 hours a day. Is that really true? What proposals did you come up with during that time? Those 4 years where, and then just calculate up, it's what is it, 13 billion pounds were stolen and extorted. So with that backdrop, could just continue with the deposition. Give them a 2 or 3 page deposition maximum. And then, I don't know, whether 5, 10 years, something like that, might come into question. Who knows? But certainly in days gone by, see, this is the thing, we're so far beyond the good old days, right? Social position was dependent upon a bunch of other things. So if you're in a lunatic society, or a society full of crime, there is no high society. What there might be is a pseudo-high society. And that's sort of what they are at this point. So their opinions are so off base on certain issues. It's good to ask them, like, what do you think about this irregular invasion? Oh, yes, well, it worked in America, so certainly it'll work here. It didn't work in America. Their whole concept of the United States is completely misguided. It's an anthropological trope. Were there migrants? Yes, there were. There were European migrants that were all suffering under ridiculous kings and lords and peasant commanders. And yet they had the basics for integrating together because they didn't have much of anything against that in the way of off-putting and incompatible characteristics. And so it did form a new whole without a lot of the stupefying regulations that the rent-seeking class had foisted upon them. So of course they weren't really keen on the idea for centuries. These people that pontificate and think that they know better than everyone else when they don't. Now the other, let's say, non-integratable aspects of the United States still plague it today, to this very day. Indian reservations was an attempt to come to some type of solutions. That's not, I would say, a winner necessarily. The other international inspired Leninistic policies have been nothing but a total disaster. Just a one-way rampage of terrorism for the last couple of decades. Some version of South African policies, which of course can be seen within a geopolitical, strategic, military context. So any mothballed smelling intellectual that just passes those things off and thinks they're going to continue on in their legacy of doing nothing, I believe they have a big assumptions about, first off, their contribution to progressive societies in a true sense, not in the rhetorical sense that they like to think themselves as the progressive party, when in fact they're the retrograde, barbarian, incompetent, and weak, misguided party. So what makes societies, economies, and polities strong? Well, those are principles of solidarity, unity, resiliency, not just efficiency. That's the other thing. Rent-seeking class, yeah, raise the rents, raise the interest rates, raise the mortgages. That's that makes a big win for them. Everyone else, they don't really care about them. They're stuck in some type of social dynamic where if they can win via those means, they do it. That's their business. And these people are indirectly associated with that business. They've been associated with that business. They don't see a problem with that business. They've talked themselves into rationalizing that business. They have a deep-seated sense of superiority because of that business. And they're not looking to question themselves on any fundamental level. So being charged with mass extortion at some point, I do think will come as a shock to them. It's a recurring occurrence. It's very human. It's very understandable how these bubble-fied people come to comfortable conclusions, and they will ride it out till the wheels fall off, and then it's woe is me, and the ride's over. But how far the country or the region, Europe as a whole, is now descending into total anarchy. It's already happened in Africa. But of course, there's a lot of fake stories as far as the success of that place are concerned in circulation in these bubble-fied disinformation zones. So in another way, it's not just ineffectual leadership. It's almost like a public relations campaign for exterminationism, for people that are just cynical by nature. This is sort of their tendency. They're not life-affirming type people. They're just looking to kick the bucket because they lost a long time ago. They lost their scruples a long time ago. They lost their values a long time ago. So just riding it out, holding on, holding on to appearances, holding on to the hedges that keeps them separate until that no longer works, and then they'll just throw their hands up. Don't shoot, they'll say. But these are just how things. This is just causality. It's a human condition that people who lose lost it a long time ago. Just to give you an example of how out to lunch this type of class is if you ask them, well, what about the trajectories of the UK, the Commonwealth, the United States, since, let's say, the last, let's just be fair, let's say the last 70 years. Say, well, I think that, relatively speaking, we managed the decline rather successfully. So just think about that for a second. Manage decline successfully. So they're successful decline managers. It really is hard to understand unless you realize that they're in a position that they're just detached. They're watching, okay, look at this. Watching everything decline, but I'm successfully watching things decline. That's sort of how they see themselves. So I guess you could think of them as captured in a lot of different ways, but captured by, I would say, financial management. I feel that they feel so comfortable that when they go to the bank, that all that money that's supposedly in there is still going to be in there, or where their names are attached to different notary deeds, that they're going to stay there. So they're successfully watching a decline happen from their point of view. So that's sort of what you could expect from that contingent of eggheads. It's always wise not to make any statements that are not first wise ones. I think if we're going to return to the spirit of compassion, which is really the wisest, it's not a normal condition. But if you return to the wisest position, you can also have compassion for the people trying to make things better in this world. Even if they're in socially responsible positions and don't fulfill their duties in a manner that is commiserate with their position. Think of a Shakespearean play where actors, people, parts like that appeared all the time as the fools of life, the fools of position, the fools of authority and responsibility. But I have to say that statement, successfully managing decline, is what the chief old retired barrister of today has come up with. That's the compliment, that the backhanded compliment that he has for himself and people like himself. The UK has rather successfully managed its decline and looks to be able to be doing that more successfully than the United States. It's positioned to more successfully manage more decline in the years to come. So that's the position opposite of the make the United Kingdom brilliant again platform. So that the make the United Kingdom brilliant again is diametrically opposed. It is in the opposition to that type of mentality. If you're not of the persuasion that managing decline is not success, if you think that managing decline is the definition of being unsuccessful, then you belong in the make the United Kingdom brilliant again camp, because it can be brilliant again. It can be much better. In fact, we could switch to the odd concept of managing ascendancy successfully instead. I think another key takeaway of that class of people that consider themselves successful decline managers is that they're a part of the decline. Obviously, they see decline as success. So it just shows you where they are. They're captured by the decliners, by the decline, by the forces of decline. They're aligned with the forces of decline. So is it a decline for them? It's a decline for you. It's a decline of morals. It's a decline of scruples. It's a decline of accountability, but not really for them. So this is another thing that nihilism can get you. When you have nihilistic people, they're sort of high functioning people. They can speak, they can dress themselves. But there's something you should know about them. They don't care about anything outside of their own profitability metrics. And this ultimate vulgarity is really hard to understand for people that aren't like that. So again, if you come in at the lowest level, like if you can slither like a snake under a carpet because you're millimeters high, because you have a near non-existent innate feeling for example, socially responsible policies, then you can just move in that environment as if it's an open space. It's a vaulted cathedral, the carpet that you're slithering on there. So you have to think, if they've been negatively selecting for people, the whole apparat, or however many there are, this is the world they live in, the subterranean managers of decline. So they have enough space to slither. So they'll slither into the social venues. See, before, when Christianity was a more socially enforced norm, they could really kid themselves with a lot of exceptionalism. Like, well, look at me. I don't believe anything, and here's all these people that believe all these things I don't believe. So they could really take on airs of intellectualism as well. But ultimately, someone who doesn't care about anyone is careless. Carelessness becomes endemic. But they also don't care about their lives on some level as well. They're willing to throw them away. And they do. And not just their lives, but others as well. So it's quite a low time when they're predominant in institutions. And the results speak for themselves. So it's this type of person. I think you can start positive. I think part of the rejuvenational process will be selecting for people that don't have those traits to begin with. And being a little bit more rigorous about selecting for people like that, and also being a little bit more rigorous about the educational institutions that don't promote tripe like that. Because we don't need people like that in a system that is better. Now, they might have it on a personal, private level, but not levels of high social, financial, or executive responsibility. A few words on Admiral Nelson. I really don't like to get into biographical details or psychoanalysis, but it may or may not be true. Let's just say the stories I heard about Admiral Nelson. So again, this is secondhand. You don't know. It may or may not be true. But in any case, his mother died when he was 9. And at 12 he was sent to the Navy, so that should give you some indication that he wasn't all that coddled all that much. Did not come from a very nurturing background. And in that case had sort of a deficit, and then decided he wanted to become a hero, and then he was very ambitious, too ambitious. So he was looking to get into a fight with other ships, in other words, looking for some negative attention in a way. Although, of course, it was given. He had orders to follow, but this was the path, and he followed the French fleet all the way down through the west, well, through the Caribbean and then back. For like 2 years, he was supposed to engage the enemy and wasn't able to do it. This is back when it was sailing ships, so. And he was sort of nerve-wracked. Imagine being that young with that much responsibility, and basically every day could be life or death. One of those ships tack in the middle of the night and gives you a broadside at 5 a.m. in the morning. It's not pretty. You have to be on top of things, and a lot of things are going wrong. You got a lot of people on the ship, you got a lot of different conditions. Some people are sick, some people went missing, some people might have criminal backgrounds with violent tendencies and drinking habits, and you name it. They had it back then, but they didn't have a lot of dentistry or other medical accoutrements that we enjoy today. So life was just amazingly harder and tougher than we can even possibly imagine in these days. For example, they said he lost like all of his front teeth. At some point, probably decay had to be pulled, which was sort of a common thing back in the day. You don't think about it, but modern dentistry is just such a wondrous gift to humanity. It's just really indescribably beneficial, which is why I think it would be a sin and a shame if we regressed civilizationally, and that's why I do say it's important to make a stand for civilization, at least the true kind, not the deceptive kind. Oh, no. Here's progress right down this ditch full of burning tar. A grease-smeared, blood-smeared, excrement-smeared spiral staircase down to the dungeons of dysfunction. No, I don't think therein lies the way. I think it lies somewhere else. And the great thing is we got lots of options on the table. We got multipolarity. What a wonderful thing. Instead of going to destruction, we're going the other way. So, in any case, I don't want to belittle in any way the just extreme conditions that especially a young Admiral Nelson was subjected to, and that he started off with certain disadvantages and was in a set of conditions with a certain conditionality which may or may not be considered favorable. Finally, one's fate is one's fate, especially if one does not have the skill to make changes on certain subjective spiritual levels that are quite difficult and counterintuitive, and you do need some time and leisure to do it, some time of reflection. And it's not easy. In fact, it's very rare that people do that. It's so rare that the people that do that in Southeast Asia, they consider them holy people, like they are revered. But if you have none of those people anywhere in any part of your society, or you're not privy to them, or you don't believe they exist, well, you don't have the benefit of whatever they could otherwise transmit to you in the form of letting things go and being a source of your own satisfaction, not looking to others for your satisfaction, not looking for acclaim as a substitute for compassion. And again, self-generated compassion, that's something to think about. It sounds like, oh, of course I'm compassionate with yourself. No, you're not. You're actually not even close. And that's the problem. So it takes like a two-step process, or three. First, you have to come out of denial, then you have to admit it, then you have to look for it, then you have to correct it. So it's a complex process and not so easy to refine when you've got things like cannonballs getting blasted in your face. So I think anyone could forgive Admiral Nelson's weaknesses in certain areas. So he got into some foolhardy, like full-on frontal assault type situations, which, if the truth be told, not just endangered him personally, but all the men with him, which is not something that a leader should do. That's the type of leadership that gets yourself and others killed or seriously wounded, and this is the problem. He did get seriously wounded on multiple occasions. He lost the sight in his eye, I believe his right eye, and he also lost his right arm. He was pulling a sword, got hit with a musket ball, shattered the bone. He was lucky that somebody cinched it off, and without any anesthesia to speak of that we know of, maybe a splash of brandy, one would hope, they sawed off his arm right below the shoulder. So, and it was a failed attempt, and finally they lost. They didn't complete the objective. It was a foolhardy and ill-advised plan. So he was constantly putting himself in the middle of the fray, and it's a miracle he didn't die on multiple occasions as well, because he got a big piece of steel that hit him in the head at a tremendous rate of speed, having exploded apart with black powder, one would think. Maybe it was the chain reaction of a French magazine exploding and ripping an entire oak ship to splinters in his near vicinity, combined with getting hit with a piece of metal in the head, that led some people of the time to believe that he had some type of brain injury that was significant, that also led to headaches, bouts of madness, and other things. So by the time he decided to charge into a flotilla of French galleons, he led the charge in his ship, the HMS Victory. He went straight in to the fray, when certainly someone of his age and his position and his organizational and experienced talents of experience would dictate that he would not be on the front line. And so finally, what did that, his ship, which was, you would think, a flagship, because he was at that time, I believe, an admiral, what did they think about that? Rather, would you call it a gallant charge or a suicidal one? I guess it does depend on how you look at it. But they do say he didn't believe he would be returning home to the loving, voluptuous arms of his mistress. Who happened to be, I believe, a daughter of a blacksmith that ended up in Naples, in which he was also involved in different situations that weren't very flattering for a hero. And yet, what can anyone say about the matter? Who can throw shade at this time at any one person for any reason? What would be the point of doing that? We don't have a problem of having too few heroes and too many heroes. We have really a problem of having too few. But what does the public understand as a hero? He was considered a national hero at the end of the day. Once he died on the deck of the HMS Victory. So, well, what's the point of this whole story? Well, just as Plutarch learned of the lives of generals and politicians and philosophers and poets, we can learn of a Navy man that sounds a bit misguided and also a bit dangerous, and yet those are the type of people that you will find in those types of professions, presumably, and yet one would hope they would experience true victory in this life, in that they can get beyond greed, ill will, and delusion. And need not die bravely before one's time, seeking death instead of life. Back to the point. It would have been better for Admiral Nelson, as well as for his men, if he was not looking for something other than capable defense or capable offense, without all of the personal ambitions or personal reasons that ultimately do appear to have a good dose of irrationality in them for wrong reasons based on wrong perceptions that could have easily been changed had the admiral given himself his own orders and stood down. Reapproached the problem from a different angle, sailed around it this way, sailed around it that way, tested the breeze here, tested the tack there, experienced the weather here, experienced the weather there, and reapproached the problems with more professionality and less fame or the desire for it. Because fame is an externality, and he also learned of its fickleness. When you win, the crowd loves you. When you lose, what does the crowd do then? And what do you do then to your opinion of yourself based on the crowd. So how vulgar is that? To concede to the jury of the common. Instead of the guidance of the gods. Being a poet is quite a good thing because you can only be one. You can't be a politician in times like these. You can barely be a comedian. As long as you're not heard, you can be one. The second you are, well, they'll define what you are. And what you are is something that's not advantageous for them. So if they can stop it somehow, then they would. But if they can ignore it, they will. If they can't, they won't. Just look at how few values are really there amongst all of these humanitarians. Once one or two things go wrong for them, and yet one of the most absurd things to witness is when they see for a second that they're not all-knowing. They really aren't. But this is what vulgar people do, is that they believe themselves to be all-knowing. And so they're very shocked when they realize that they're completely wrong on multitudinous issues. And yet they will not admit that because vulgar people do not admit when they are wrong. They double down, they triple down. This is what they do. And you can simplify international relations. Just as people, it's a neighborhood. You've got this neighbor. He takes a trash can and just throws trash over his head and over his yard, and you can't talk to the guy because he's not listening to what you have to say. He doesn't consider your rules to have executive authority. And if he feels himself to be stronger than you, let's say he's a behemoth, why should he listen to a small bespectacled man that is carrying a cane that, or no, he thought it was a cane, but it turned out to be a boomstick instead? Then perhaps the behemoth will listen, perhaps he won't. But boomsticks go boom, so I do believe there will be a change in behavior one way or another. So that's how a lot of humans solve not so complex problems when you look at them from a standpoint of pure neutrality. So, but people would say, oh, this is much too simple, people doing this. But yeah, nations are like that. Nations adopt behaviors, nations evolve into better values, and nations succumb to horrible values. Nations have good management, then they get horrible management. And the results go like this and that. Good management. Look at Trafalgar Square. We have some architectural remains of what it looks like those times, the spirit of the times. And then you have just gigantic, bulbous, neo-barbarian monstrosities that make no sense and just rob the landscape, denude it, and impose upon it. And you have that symbolic equivalent in culture and arts and every other expressive medium that we are inundated with oppressively in this time for geopolitical reasons. Some rotten eggheads came up with the idea that we were an anachronism. We're going away because it suits them best if we do. The more degradingly and quickly, the better, type thing. So, but if you question them, they'll say, "No, that's not at all what we're doing." Well, let me tell you, and they flip. They do an inversion, and 3 years later, you can go to their cities and just pull out like a yellow notepad and just start writing down things that don't work. In the span of 48 hours, I believe that would be enough to put any honest person to scarlet face shame for the tremendous lies that they speak based on a tremendous delusion that they have. So, but gassed up people, they can't be wrong, or they're not as wrong as someone who doesn't have the class position as someone such as the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal. Unappointed, unpaid, unheard. Surely they are the credentialed party. They do like credentials, don't they? Just like Nelson overly liked stars. The thought of the idealist came back to me recently. Idealistic people, they're delusional. That's just the way to put it. It's a delusionality that appears to be something good. That's why it's quite effective on good people, because good people want good things, or at least people that believe they're good people. They think they're doing the right thing, but it's a deception. That's the most deadly kind. That's the most deadly kind. See, you can be also delusional about doing the right thing, but you think it's the wrong thing. For example, someone who has developed an over-affection for something, or might overestimate their skill. Like, I'm such a great skier. I skied over 100 kilometers an hour down slopes that are double black diamonds. Of course, I can handle this maneuver, and they overestimate their skills and they die or get horribly injured. Now, when I say overestimate skill, let's just say we don't doubt their skill at all. In fact, their skill was there the whole time. But in this world of out of controlness and impermanence and variety, there was just a patch of ice in an unexpected place that led to unexpected catastrophic causalities, such as you slipping in a weird angle to a slight fraction of a degree that makes it impossible to avoid hitting an object that you otherwise would have missed by meters had everything been perfect. But idealism, let's just get back to it. It's delusionality. He's such an idealistic person. Rewrite that in your brain. This is a delusional person. That's it. He might think he has high ideas, but they lead to disaster. For example, oh yeah, sure, I can let anybody into my private life, and of course things will go swimmingly well the more they're able to embed themselves, especially if they have a hidden agenda which isn't for your benefit, Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's malign influence. But you couldn't have possibly have seen that because that was beyond reasonable doubt for you. That's how people get conned. That's how it happens. That's how you get tricked. So, but if you have a big self that says, no, I could never be tricked. Nobody tricks me, by golly. I've never been tricked. That type of person is tricked. The person is in a delusion about their delusionality. And then you can ask them, well, what are you doing in 6 months? And they might have something like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and that. 2 weeks later, you hear they drop dead of a heart attack. So how on point were they in terms of reality up until the point that the rug was pulled out underneath their feet? So there is nobody that has gone through life that has not been tricked. And tricked in small things and tricked even more in big things, such as concepts of society and our role in it, or roles, or identities, or affiliations, or group affinity, or group aversion, or politicizing of things that weren't politicized before, or foreigners coming in and pretending not to be hostile but acting in hostile ways, claiming they're not doing that, putting poison frames on people that claim they are doing that, ascribing to it some type of cockamamie frame and negativity that doesn't really belong to it, because it's sort of like one of those things where people will suggest, for example, having easier, simpler security, or perhaps the security trade-offs versus having a concept of openness aren't worth it. And actually they're incongruent. They can't simultaneously exist. So that's why it was done in the past, and that's why it's continued to be done. And there's very many reasons for it, not the least of which is security. And security is very important. Without it, you don't have the basis of a civilization. You don't. It's not there. So it's weird, like civilizations that get wrecked on the level of values and politics and ethics and everything else. Investing there is unwise. You can invest the best things and it's still going to turn into crap, because the conditions for it working, the preconditions, which are ethereal or metaphysical, because how do you define a value? Like, well, they state that they have a working legal system, but in reality they don't, because they can't really be truthful about it. Because the people that let that information be known are not considered to be the people in authority. And they have a vested interest in not having themselves portrayed as such an authority that does not perform the basic function, or acts in the basic spirit of the functions that they're supposed to perform. Like, just for absurd examples, because it's really comedic if you get back down to it. If you apply the principle to places where it is funny, it would be like a plumber that doesn't fix plumbing, but he breaks plumbing. Call a plumber and they break your plumbing. That could be, again, a film. Just at least 1.5 hours of that theme, just going through all of the myriad of situations, comical situations that arise, and then the causality connected with that type of misguided behavior. And then just the immense damage that people like that cause. because of that basic disconnect, that connection to delusional idealisms that mask the reality of their actions and the causality of their actions. Such as, oh, this was a great venue, it's now wrecked. The venue, well, there is no venue. But there they are, the gatekeepers of a wrecked venue. They're making sure the venue stays wrecked too. Because they want the people going to the other venues that aren't so wrecked as this wrecked venue. So, and then the delusionality of these types of bouncers in front of a wrecked venue. Why is it good, the business model? Well, because they get paid for doing that business model. They didn't get accepted as CEO of a space age company. They didn't get nothing. They probably got denied for working at a 7-Eleven. Something like that. They just didn't have enough digits. Or maybe they just got out of a facility for doing something that they had been proven beyond a reasonable doubt to have done. And that's not the only thing they did or will be doing. So people like that, why wouldn't they be a bouncer for a cockamamie scheme that profits them? They're not big into philosophical concepts about who's damaging who and on a macro scale. They put those types of inquiries behind them if they ever pick them up in the first place, which is debatable. Maybe between commercials on their phone, where they're just scrolling one inane thing after the next. There's like a 2-second gap where they question the direction and meaning of their lives. And then it's back to the scroll, next to the toilet bowl. So it's idealistic to think that everyone is on the same level, morally, ethically, and certainly on the basis of integrity, which in our time and possibly in other times is as rare as platinum, as far as the noble metals go. You ever see a piece of platinum just laying around? That's about what we've got, the equivalent of it in neo-barbaric times. Which is another thing. Any type of administration becomes like a feudal thing. So you have these little, again, puffed up managers that feel like they're completely autonomous. And then they'll make decisions with foreign powers and get kickbacks and not see any type of related interconnection, inner workings. Or if they do, they just, put it aside because they got $100K in the form of something or other. Maybe they donated something to the donut fund. So that's the low levelness and stupidity that level that they came in on, and that's why it worked. Now, will it stop working at some point? Well, maybe. Certainly when the wheels fall off, it will. But maybe it can fall off before that, and massive, simple reforms can be enacted that will have night and day type of effects on turning a venue from a burnt out, flaming pile of a garbage can culture to one that it was meant to be. As for a possible dispute between people who believe in Jesu and people who believe in Buddhism, I believe there's a certain connectivity, which means you could look at Jesu as a Buddha to a certain extent, but maybe a bodhisattva, if we're going to take the Mahayana perspective, which I think has a whole lot to offer. Let's not forget the contribution of Zen. The Zen school is Mahayana, but of course the Theravada has a better, perhaps, program as far as monastics are concerned. And then there's Kung Fu in between that, and also Tai Chi. I think Tai Chi is overlooked. And then, of course, the Taoist schools. So there's so many contributors to positive life, so many contributors to vital life, so many contributors to magical life, to religious life as well. Religion in terms of repetitive behavior that is skillful. Let's not get away from original definitions. Let's not become dogmatists. Let's look at it as an exercise. Gymnastics, it's an exercise. You cannot define gymnastics ultimately, but gymnastics are certainly recognizable when they are skillful and when they are not. Someone who falls from the balance beam, they had high ambitions, but the reality of the matter is that they did not succeed, and some of them break their backs thereby, or legs or arms, and are then cripples as well. So the result, or the consequence of not being a skillful gymnast can potentially be life-ending or life-crippling. I don't think the odds should be underplayed. I think people who think that it just goes off all swimmingly and don't see the tragic side of very many, even skillful practitioners, above average skillful practitioners that have been horribly, horribly injured. Beyond all concepts of worldly justice, in other words, disproportionately, negatively affected by chance occurrences. That's it. There's no other thing than that, and yet there's a certain causality in it, because how could there not be causality in any type of occurrence? The fall down the mountainside, although you put in, let's say, 6,000 hours of extreme training under extreme circumstances, and yet even then, at such a level of mastery, you cannot ever exclude out of controlness, ever. And so on that day when you were 3,000 meters above the Earth's meridian, and it had rained the night before, and certain things were frozen, that you may have experienced a rapid descent in altitude, and yet the angels spared you a fate of such a ignoble and yet, in some sense, also noble death. That they carried you mid-flight. This is what happened, is that far before you struck the ground, they upheld you. In the moment of your greatest folly, you recovered. It's always a good idea to take complicated things and simplify them as much as you can. Now, some people can oversimplify things, but I think it's a whole lot better to get to the point where you're maybe oversimplifying a little bit, but you're getting really close to a basic truth that doesn't need to be complicated. So coming back to the culture war, what is one of the main things they try to do? Well, they try to create division. I say it over and over again, divide and conquer. See, first division, then conquering. Social division, then a military defeat. So, but first social division, and that has an open end aspect to it. So let's commit to, let's just say we're an enemy operator and we see that there's some superpower or collection of states, a coalition of states that, let's just loosely term them the West, that we don't like because we're not part of it. We never were. In fact, we've always been sort of a detriment, a blight on the planet. Let's just say, for argument's sake. So you have to see things from their point of view. Westerners are very myopic. It's like as if nothing else exists outside of the West. But there's billions of people on the outside of the West. Billions, a lot more. So they care a lot more about themselves than Westerners care about them. And they also care a lot more about Westerners than Westerners care about them. Because Westerners don't care about them at all. Unless they start making themselves a nuisance, which is what they've started to do, because they're used in a divide part of the divide and conquer strategy. How do you divide up a country? How about import a bunch of people that don't like each other and never will, for irrational, irreconcilable reasons that humans are prone and apt to have, that are known quantities. Just look at the ancient Greeks. The Spartans didn't like the Athenians. There should have really been no reason for that. And yet there were big battles, big wars. But today we're so modern, we've put all of that into the past. There won't ever be a land war again. We've put war behind us. We're on the USS Enterprise. We're orbiting the galaxies. We've got a multicultural crew, and they all work together wondrously. Of course, this trope is going to trump realities. Of course, it has in my mind. Why hasn't it happened in your mind yet? So this type of cotton candyism is really dangerous and stupid, and it works on Westerners. Very, very strange exploit. It's like having some type of old Commodore 64 computer, and it's just like there's no firewall at all. Just like zips right in. Can't we all get along? Well, look, that's in-group altruism. That's altruism that was meant for the in-group. You get wig flippers, sociologists, and anthropological terrorists, programmatic culture war operatives. They'll have you misapply in-group altruism to out-groups that essentially want to exterminate your group. And if they don't want it, that's what they end up doing, whether they want to or not. Because that's what divide and conquer does. They're part of a military campaign. That's the way to think of it. And so the problem is, though, when you start talking about these things in an academic setting that is lock, stock, and bursting at the seams full of cultural terrorists, they present you as the bad guy for just stating the plain truth like that. You're the problem, not them. They have a micro majority in a captured venue, and they do not tolerate opinions such as yours, because they've categorized them as being anti-divisionary. And because they're for the divisionary side of things, you're the bad guy. Who can do this? Well, wig flippers can. People who have inverted values can. People working for the other side can. So much working for the other side that they present themselves not as being that, so it makes them more effective, makes it harder to dismiss them. People that will go to over-emotionalized levels that a normal Westerner wouldn't go, they will go that far because they're that type of operative. They will scream and deny things that a normal Westerner wouldn't deny if they weren't authentic, but inauthentic people will. People who put in way more effort, which you would think is just because they're doing it because they really believe what they're doing it, but they're not getting paid six figures to do it by geopolitical adversaries. That's beyond belief for most Westerners, but they have those types of deals and arrangements. So lots of farce, lots of charlatanism, lots of extremely toxic, pernicious, and pathogenic social programs, dynamics, groups, fundings, mandates, you name it. Full combined arms. You thought you were just looking at tanks that could read thermal images in the night. No, they had sent a helicopter or an airplane or its cultural equivalent to hit you in a trench somewhere that the tank couldn't get you at. You thought you had air defense and you were prepared for tanks. They came up with some type of gas that they can spray that you can't smell, but has some type of nerve agent in it. That's what happens in war. This is a culture war that somebody else thought this term up. They attributed war to the culture war, and the war is hell. So it doesn't behoove you to poo-poo war. Oh, but this is just a culture war. It doesn't matter. Of course it matters. You lose culture war, you lose the military war. That's it. It's really funny to see things that way. Depends. I mean, again, if you want to say it's funny to see things that way, I don't think it's funny. For example, how about unit cohesion? So, present, and you say that, and then 15 people do what they want to do. 5 people start break dancing. 2 stick the rifle straight up their butts. Another 2 start screaming that the whole history of the organization is wrong. 5 people run left, 10 people, you're done. Just go ahead and show up on a battlefield. Or just take care of yourselves because you're not an effective unit. You're a disgrace. You're a stupefying stupidity. You have 0 chance of being effective against an organized, unified opponent. 0 chance. And of course, it's a grayscale. So you go from 0 to, maybe just 50% cohesion. So that means we have 100 guys. We're pitting them against the 100 guys of the enemy, but actually 50% of our guys aren't really there. They're not a cohesive whole. So it's 2 to 1 against us, despite having the same numbers. Are you going to win that engagement? Do you think God is on your side? Because he better be. I mean, maybe it's possible. Maybe it's part of his grand plan that the 50 plus maybe 25 of the cohesive side have to die first before this sea change in seeing things in a clear light has to happen first before the revelation can happen. Oh, you know what? Those guys were dead weight the whole time. And they ended up getting half of the guys that weren't dead weight killed too. So how many of us are left now? 25, and we're facing 75 of the other crew. Well, what do we do now? You better hope they're not more unified than the 25 left. I'd say the 25 has a fighting chance. That 25 really, it does depend on what they do next. And if they decide to go back to the old way that doesn't work, it's proven not to work, that has never worked, never will work, but does have Blarney machines behind it, well, then that 25 is going to get decimated. It's just a matter of time. How about, everybody run to the trench, and the 25 just say, oh yeah, you know what, after that first engagement, I think we're just going to be fading into the hinterlands, because the chances of success here are not very high. This organization that was supposed to be built on organizational principles is compromised. Doesn't work. Here's a truck, I get inside, I hit the gas, it doesn't go. Open the hood of the truck, and all the cables ripped out. Guess it's been sabotaged. Can that happen in a cultural war? It does in a material war. Oh, there's all this food that was sent down by parachute, but oh look, somebody took gallons of motor oil, dumped it all over the rice. Guess I can't be eating my rice now. It's been sabotaged. Cultural sabotage. Oh, but no, that doesn't exist. According to social sabotage people. No. You're the sabotage is what they say. We're not that. We're highly moral people that have such convoluted principles that not everyone can understand it at first, because it's like a cult. You know, we start telling you about UFOs and Jesus coming down, and then if you want to meet Jesus because the comet's coming, you better, do this and that. You don't think people are that stupid and gullible? You don't think it's happened before to smart people? People who've gone to university, people who came from good families, people who had their heads polished like chrome torpedoes. You don't think they didn't go boom in life at some point with all the collateral damage associated with that, all the loss and potentiality associated with that, the opportunity cost associated with that. The factory doesn't get built, the entrepreneur gets sabotaged, the production line doesn't get running, the electrical grid is spotty. How many thousand cuts does there have to be before something doesn't work? Maybe it's just 10 cuts, 1 cut. With these horribly stupid, incompetent, and criminally minded politicians get into leadership positions, well, guess what? All these other things that you can't even imagine don't get done because of that. Incalculable loss. Devastating, critical loss. Not to mention all the good times that won't be happening because all of these bad occurrences have happened, and it might just be a couple of them. One bad politician in Birmingham. Just diminished the possibility of that place by like 90%. What is the monetary value you want to put on that? Like, do you want to reduce things to money? Because that's part of a culture war too. Oh, there's no such thing as values, there's just money. You have something good, somebody will pay for it. And prices keep going up for good things because there's a lack of good things, but there's a whole lot of money in circulation. Isn't that the definition of inflation? How much is your money worth? Yeah, it just keeps losing 100% year on year, like in places. Couldn't happen here, it happened in Argentina, a super civilized country with every reason in the world to be extremely prosperous. Couldn't happen in Argentina, it happened in Argentina. What does Argentina have that your country doesn't have? So we've got an army of dunces, an army of very misguided people running around, ripping and tearing. I mean, if we haven't reached peak division yet, it's like, how far away is that? Now, the sadists will stand up and say, oh, I've heard of this problem before. We'll just torture people more, force them more to conform to cockamamie social situations. Because, yeah, when they're going to die or starve or die horribly, then they will get on with the program. I don't think it's advisable to listen to sadists. First off, that's conjecture. A lot of people die before they make the ultimate submission to bad ideas. And it's not worth the loss. Why not just change the principles? You know what? That was the dumb time, the diversity time. Now we're going to the unity time. The unity and cohesion time. We're moving on. It was a bad dream, bad people, bad policies, bad deeds, bad words. We're leaving that all behind. We've identified it, we put it, it's categorized, it will go down in history as a time of infamy, a time of total incompetence, a very destructive and misguided time, but we're leaving it behind. We're going into an age where we don't have those most basic of problems, such as the promotion of division, the subsidy of divisionary policies, the importation of division. We're going to have more of an exportation of division. See, we're going to flip the script. Now, some people, again, overreaction. Oh no, anybody do the one thing that tries to right this ship, they're the wrong person. Those people are also part of the problem. They're the a priority problem. People get hysterical about making just very simple solutions to complex problems. They're part of the problem. And they don't need to be listened to. They just need to be identified and excluded. That's it. Nothing more dramatic or less dramatic than that. We don't have time for idiots. The idiot clock, it ran out. Somebody needs to wind it up again, but we don't even know where it is. So we're not going back to that time. There's no inducement. There's no sadist whip that can force us to go back to that dumb, dark time. For whatever manifold of explanations, conjectures, projections, poison framings, whatever it is that the crazy side has on their side. We don't need to entertain it. It's been entertained to death. It's like, just imagine the dumbest of retrograde lounge lizards that's been up on the stage just since 1975. That's sort of like the equivalent of what we've experienced. The venue's empty, it stinks. The routine never was good to begin with, and each joke falls flat every time. It's like programmatic. Don't need it, just who cares? The venue, they don't have the venue. Leave these people behind where they in the barbaric past. You're doing yourself and them a favor. There's no point in interacting with people that are just high on historical tropes. So high that they can overlook the realities on the ground. I'm not making this stuff up. The people that would get into some type of rage about what I'm saying, they're in a bubble. So who knows what their lives look like, where they came from. They're completely delusional. And you don't need to keep coming back to addressing delusional people. You see it, oh, you know what? I can drink a whole bottle of vodka and work on a skyscraper in construction. Sure you can, buddy. I'm sure you can. Until it doesn't work out. And then what? Well, as long as it's just you that gets injured in your folly, but that's not the case. The riveting gun that you were holding, not only when you fell off the 100th floor, did your body crash into something on the ground, which created a hazard, but that riveting gun, that was really dangerous too. And those things are expensive, and you don't need any people doing stupid things in high and dangerous places just for the sheer hell of it, just because they think they can handle ridiculous behavior because they're them. But that's the gassed up type of political personalities we have these days. And pull the scales off your eyes. These are the lowest of the low. These are the lowest. So 100 people wouldn't do it, but they would. That's the way to see them. And see them also as proxies. They are the face. Something else put them there. If they're unqualified, something else put them there. It's like there's a marathon, but a guy in a wheelchair won the marathon. How the hell did that happen? Well, obviously the thing's rigged. So you get one of these stupid, imbecilic, me people and got into politics. The whole system, everything's broken. The marathon don't work anymore. Stop clapping. It's a troll. And now in a marathon, it doesn't really matter, does it? But if these are the people who are supposed to keep your country from getting rolled over, keeping plagues from spreading, and all different types of very important things, you should take that a little bit more seriously. That does involve you. That has a direct effect potentially on your quality of life or the duration of your life. A lot of people don't want to be dying at 35 choking on their own fluids because these wonderful idealists let in these people that started spreading contagious diseases. So is it unfortunate we don't live in a perfect world? Not really. It's a place of learning is what it is. It's a place of testing and trial. And this is a trial, and this is what it's so easy now. It's like you can see a bus where there's like out of order just in front. They're advertising, they're letting you know. You don't have to get on that bus. So don't get on the bus. Walk if you have to. So here's a tip for spotting social imposters. Just realize that there are people that have been professionally trained to be political agitators. Now, during the Cold War, this was more known. People were looking for it, but since the fabricated end of the Cold War, the big dupery, as I like to call it, people don't think that these operators exist because, of course, there's no such thing as a Cold War anymore because there's now a war going on. So we're now in a hot warism. So now we can return to not just the concept of the political agitator, but start seeing how they work. Because chances are, just like I mentioned in a previous episode, that, for example, they're trained to wait. If there's a venue that has a question and answer session at the end of a presentation, which is usually the case, then they'll make sure that they stock them in the audience, and then they have prepared questions and a prepared way of operating. Like they'll escalate. Sometimes they'll scream out radical slogans. Sometimes they'll try to shut down the speaker. But sometimes it's more coy. It's sophist. It's rhetorical. The whataboutism is the easiest one to spot. But they have, I think, maybe someone has captured one of their manuals or maybe an updated version, maybe they have 50 different little cons, political cons that they engage in. But remember, the political agitator that is engaging in a question and answer session like that, witness not just that their opinions are full of fabrications, but they're wasting time. So the legitimate questioner doesn't get asked. There's 33% less time. Let's just say that you have a presenter that's able to spot these people and shut them down quickly. They've still managed to burn 33% of what would otherwise been a productive, honest exchange of ideas. Now, if you're in a really bad venue, it might be that they're able to take 100% of the question and answer time. Now, ideally, they would be pre-screened. But in the case of even a worst exploit is when they actually are put up as the speakers or within a panel. So let's say you have 5 panelists, 3 of them are political agitators, or 2 of them, or just 1. 1 can vary, 2 is usually their preferred. Like 1 will play sort of the semi-passive role, and the other will play the more aggressive role. And sometimes they'll come to like a fake agreement during the panel to give people the wrong impression about bad ideas that they're trying to push. So which is why it's very important, I would recommend for anyone that wants to have a serious, legitimate panel, is make sure that you do some more investigation into these so-called experts. What is their cover story? Because a lot of times they misrepresent themselves. Where did they go to university? What did they study? And I would also go into family relations. Like, how many do you come from a single parent household? That would be one of my questions. Oh, so what happened to your father again? Okay, you have a brother and a sister. What are they doing? Are they married? What, and start feeling these people out. And if anything comes up deranged, anything comes up, what an ipso facto questionable person would have or do, they don't get invited to the panel. It doesn't matter if they're a professor of whatever it is. To find another one. Find someone who lives more congruently, such as basic values of loyalty, for example. Loyalty to culture, country, things like that, values. A lot of people go, I'm a big Christian. What does that mean? Does that mean you think you're saved or something? You've got automatic salvation. You're a rapture bunny? That's not really congruent with sound thinking. So unless it's about talking about the radicalism of post-Enlightenment Protestant theology and its effects, then you might not be cut out for the panel. And so if anyone's curating these events and they don't do that type of due diligence in these neo-barbaric times of ours, just consider them as accessories to a cultural crime with cultural criminals, and they're wasting your time and potentially spreading social pathogens that have proven devastating effects of genocidal proportions. So what they say is not trivial, what they do is not trivial. It is corrosive. It does have an effect, and that's why they're so invested in it. Some of these political agitators, they're in it. They're into the hilt. They're up to the hilt in it. They live and breathe it. They're completely dependent upon it. Some of the worst ones get emotional. I think that's one of the things that I would add. If I would put on 5 years to a sentence, if any of them are found in any venue on camera to have gotten emotional or pretend to be emotional about some type of horrific social paradigm, extra 5 years, something like that, if we ever get around to giving civilized sentences. But I would recommend, because you can't really rely on there being functioning justice systems once these people get through with things, it's best to just weed them out, especially as a sign of respect to the audience and the venue. And if you're doing a recording, that means potentially anybody on the internet ever. Because if you include them into your panel discussion, you're becoming a conduit for their pathogenic maneuvering. You're also giving the impression that that's somehow acceptable or is a completely normal way of doing things. That it's a normal viewpoint, and they like to get in on panels that are ostensibly against the ideas they're talking about. I know this is hard to understand. This is very counterintuitive, which is why they do it. So they like to get into venues where there's ostensibly something that's criticizing horrible pathogenic social programs. But they sort of softball it, or they half do it right, and then at the end they come back and contradict themselves. They do like a full circle, a backflip of mental gymnastics. And again, maybe one of the others will then come to, it's like a fake type of dispute between two members, but then at the end they come to a lunatic conclusion, and it's sold as like being a genuine type thing. So all of these things, again, 100 years ago, these things weren't happening. Well, maybe 100 years ago they were. Let's say 200 years ago they weren't happening, at least not on this scale. But they are now. So this is the wacky time we live in. But certainly do your venue a solid and pre-weed these weeds out. And do not take their cover stories at face value. We cannot afford any naivete. They do not deserve a millimeter of space in honest venues. They've done enough damage. You don't need 5 molecules of chloride gas in your venue. You don't need any. 0. So you can have different opinions, but the people having the opinions, they should be pre-screened, pre-vetted, and also monitored. So it's possible they get leverage. They come out saying something crazy or completely offbeat, or say, I had a change of opinion. All of a sudden, I saw the light. I'm going to be raptured. I know I'm so good that the sweet chariot's going to swing low and take me off to heaven no matter what I do or say. As long as I believe I'm doing the right thing, the good thing, right? That type of mentality. Adopt that all of a sudden, but one and done. If you videotape it, just throw the videotape away or put it in a special place. A special place for infamous reversals. But that's it. You don't need to spread that around. You don't need to repeat anything they said. You don't need to repeat anything they did. Whatever they thought up was wrong. And so it can be discarded. But don't waste other people's time. And do realize they are attracted to venues that oppose them. They want to get inside as the fake opposition, and then they want to fold on the points that are essential. And it's not all that apparent how they're doing it. It takes some time watching these operators work. It could just be the use of one value or one sociologically manufactured term that they insist is important and thereby poison the entire discussion or reinforce a pathogenic trope. It could just be that. But it can be done. It will be done. I think we're in a time of falling apart, neo-barbarism, warlike period, heading into warlike conditions. A lot of the nice things will no longer be nice. A lot of bad things will get worse. And the trend will continue until it turns around or it doesn't. And history is full of civilizations that haven't done it. So even if it doesn't happen, it's not earth-shattering, is it? It's not. It's happened before. Horrible, horrible, stupid, terrible, criminal, despotic people have had their sway on this planet in certain places at certain times, and there was nothing anyone could have done about it really at the time. Why was there a malaria infection in southern Italy at these certain times that killed off all of these different communities? Well, causality, out of controlness, impermanence. So systems can be created, systems can fall apart. Oh, this casino is always making money, everything, and then some corrupt dealers came in and the house got taken for a ride. It's now boarded up. Windows smashed out, graffiti everywhere. But 10 years ago, it was really the place to be. Can't happen, you think? Oh no, here, this place is too civilized. You're wrong. And they're wrong. So you can be right during wrong times. You can be wrong during right times. It's all really up to you what your personal responsibility is or the extent of it. And oftentimes we feel ourselves more responsible for things that we aren't responsible for. This type of betrayal, this type of sabotage, just unimaginable. And yet here it is. It's what? It's like, what? The house burnt down. I didn't see it coming. Now it's here. Well, it's not the end of the world. But there is a causality of illegitimacy. So if a political class is illegitimate, then their authority is illegitimate, which means everybody that works for them is illegitimate. Everything they want to do is illegitimate. So the badges, the guns, the words printed in books that they call laws, all that type of stuff, really isn't what it used to be. It's all delusional. But as far as right values go, right values are never delusional. It's only delusional to see them as being the wrong values. That can happen. But you can then really also retreat. You say, all right, well, this happened. So when they command you to go from here to there, you could just either do it or not do it or figure out some other way. But you're trying to convince people, putting them in a chicken wing and forcing them to see things your way. That often doesn't work out all that well. Not for them, not for others. Doing it for them, but not engaging with bad people, bad thoughts, and bad deeds. That is a pretty effective strategy. It did work for Lao Tzu. So there's one. There's probably a lot more than that. So we'll see how it goes. You can see things in a humorous life if you don't identify with the thing that has been compromised. Right, a submarine that was built by your country but is captained by an enemy operator, that's not your submarine anymore. Piece of artillery that was built in your hometown but has now been swung around onto your position and is operated by people in the uniform of your country, but not with the intent of it. That thing will blow you up. That thing is not yours. That thing is a thing. It's an inanimate object on its own. But if it's commandeered by the wrong leadership, might as well be an enemy force. Can that happen in a cultural war? Yeah, of course it can. Oh, I know everything about war. I read the Geneva Convention. I know everything about war. You think, oh yeah, I talk about the cultural war all the time. So I know all the different tactics. Sure you do. Is there a chance you're a polished torpedo on 2 out of 10 issues? It's possible. 2. One of the things everyone, Orwell, 19... Well, you know what? One of the cool things that came out was doublethink. People have 2 ideas that are incongruent and they hold them simultaneously. So, for example, the belief that they're a good person and doing horrible things at the same time. So, this is the realm we live in. This is the sphere of tribulation and trial. Don't waste other people's time. So here's something to look for is NGO-backed groups that are engaged in criminal activities but don't get prosecuted to the full extent of the law. So they tell the police, oh, we're here. They have community relationships managers that might also be lawyers telling the cops what they can and can't do. that may be a photo crew that they use for propaganda purposes. All the people, all the technical people working, anybody that, a gaffer, anybody that works with equipment, you really should ask yourself how much they're getting paid and by who. Because you can judge them on the basis of what they do. What they do is cause disruption. But just for the normal people, right? For them, they're getting, the best possible treatment by the cops that are really catering to them, and apparently the legal system too. So are they the preferred goons? It's like, here, we're carrying you, your political mission, into a cop car that just takes you around the block and then lets you go while you cash 6 figures from unknown people for unknown reasons, and get portrayed via maniacal public relations and information campaigns to be some type of youthful leader to mislead the youth into an ideological disability, like being lobotomized socially and politically and economically, and probably psychologically later, when these people that they completely wrecked and misdirected get completely destroyed by all the bad advice that they got pumped full of as an idealistic youth. Tremendously harmful to let predacious people with social agendas have access to young people. Tremendously disruptive, to the point of genocidal. That's how you could call it. Why not? The Ukrainians started with that, and they're right. They're not over-exaggerating. It's the people that downplay that word, or misdirect that word, or usurp that word for their own political reasons, that you have to watch for. Not everyone's claim is as valid as the others, but they're talking about it openly right now in our neo-barbarian times. See, they sold us on progress, but they delivered regression instead. That's part of misinformation, right? Oh, go this way. This is the right way. But they're not a guide, they're a saboteur. They're giving you a bum steer. But they're selling you live. I like how some of them get emotionally triggered when you would think they shouldn't be triggered. But here's the thing, they're personally invested in being traitorous. Like, their personal story is being a traitor. And so the only way they're the hero in this life is if they get emotional about not being a traitor. So they can really be convincing in the role, because this is pain, the pain of self-interest that isn't aligning with the social frame. So they want to change the social frame to fit their perfidy. That's what they consider to be exercise political will or social will. So be very cautious in any type of organized social function, because this is the environment that these tools were developed for, to play the expert as a charlatan with a political agenda, which is exterminationist. Like, civilized people would never think, what? We could have outsiders that want all of our stuff and all of us dead and are working towards those aims? What? That's implausible. Well, in your cotton candy world it is, but you're deluded. That's the problem. Like, it is a factor of life on this planet, whether you want it to be true or not, whether you can accept it as true. Because your morals don't allow it, because you have moral outrage. You're deluded, you're agitated, you're misdirected, you're programmed. So, but that's your problem. You will have all of the problems associated with bad causality as far as that's concerned. I get it. They're in the short-term racket. That's where they hit the gas. It's, okay, where is it most vulgar? Let me go there. It's most effective. That's what they think. And there's something to be said for it. It does have terrible effects on civic societies. It's like spraying like weed poison in flourishing gardens or fields, blasting it culturally in venues that were set up for the enlightenment of its citizens. They poke the eyes out of it. So technically they didn't want to shutter it because that might have been dramatic, but they just fill it out with a bunch of blarney, bunch of crap. It's not the same thing. It's much worse. It's no future, but it's not meant to have a future. It's meant to be a troll until your future is extinguished as a culture, at which time they will take over, even if it's a somewhat radioactive territory. Maybe they'll plant something wise or maybe not so wise. They're sort of a racket that takes over other countries but doesn't make those countries better, just enrich themselves type thing. Bank robber principle, criminal principle. Much more aligned to criminal principle because it is benefiting at the expense of better civilizations than one is either maintaining, shooting for, or claiming to represent, claiming to be a part of. When all of the actions are verifiably bad by scientists, the disinterested third parties, third and fourth parties. So you would think there would be the professionalism, but that's exactly where they don't have professionalism, because they're in the it's a political racket for them. It is a charlatanism that they profit by and have profited by, which is why they took the deceptive route. And they do that first by deceiving themselves. I came ahead. Everybody else got screwed. I rode the wave of infamy on my ride out on this meaningless planet type nihilistic explanations they have for themselves. So you might think, oh, this is awful. This is tremendously disheartening, but this is the realm of trial. Where did this not happen in Asia for thousands and thousands of years? I would like to know. Because I understand they have wars all the time for the smallest of infractions, including the loss of face in the eyes of the public. That is considered a very serious matter in Asian societies. Just now, from a simplistic viewpoint, you would say, oh, well, they all are the same otherwise. Yes and no. There are those with good face, and there are those with bad face. And people that had good face and might get bad face for no good reason, that is something that will be a cause of war, and has been a cause of war. And there's nothing really anyone can do about it except mention it and perhaps work on it. Letting these things like face go and adopting authenticity instead. But certainly the face should be a true face, which is to say not a deceptive face or a face turned towards aversionary things. If you turn your face to an adverse wind, why should you do that? Just because it's compelling, when you can turn your back on it instead. It's much more comfortable. Especially if you have tailored weatherproofing. It can be night and day. It can be like shifting a beach chair with a sunbreak. What was cold, what was sandy, what was unpleasant, what was bright gets turned to shade and no wind, stillness, and comfort. But not just physically, spiritually. One great thing about old age is that if you are of a noble temperament, you will tend towards a reduction in wrath about all things, and a greater appreciation will set in for the wondrously good things that can be found on this planet. They're all over the place. They're right where you are, right here, right now. A moment of perfect clarity can be had. That's sati, that's sazen. But as with any skill, for example, ladle making, it's a very technical skill, but it starts with very simple things that are also very technical if you look into them. Everything has depth. And you can expand wounds and you can make things worse if you misapply that energy, that life force, that Tao. But you can also invest it in good things, and it has also a resonating power to liberate you from agitations of any kind. And think of the gray area of agitation that we're talking about, like a nebulous cloud. That some people aren't even aware they're agitated when they're agitated, so they have the first blockage of ignorance. That is a major hindrance. It's very easy to underestimate it once you are skilled, but with ignorance, there is no possibility of attaining skill. I return to ladle making. Sure, I'll make a ladle. How? With screwdrivers? Or with sharp-shaped instruments? And then the placing of those instruments in the right places with varying pieces of wood that also have varying air moisture or moisture content. The wood is very different, cuts very different when it's very wet, and it almost chips and cracks like ceramics when it's very dry. Especially if you have dry rot, you can find dry pieces of wood that look suitable until you try to carve it. And you notice that the moisture, which is the element of water, has created flexibility in the fibers of the cell structure, which allows it to be cut smoothly, without tearing, without breaking. This is what it means to skillfully carve a block of wood. And so with such instruments, it's quite good when you develop them over time based on observation, based on requirements, based on flexibility and change. Why do you need just one carving tool if you can develop 10 that are to the purpose, which might be clearing a specific joint that is requires just that much more level of detail You could use a bigger instrument, but you could also chop through the narrowness of the handle at a point that it is better to work more carefully than with too much force. And so you can learn the delicate nuances of skillful practice. What makes the musical note resound like a trumpet, as it should resound in total harmony with the universal, with infinity. Just look at it like a mask. This is the mask you are looking at. At this moment, you are looking at the mask of tragedy. You are looking at the mask of happiness. You are looking at the mask of confusion or surprise. Go into the details of what a human being can encounter. Where is there not tragedy in the world? And yet, why should you search it out? And why should you look into its face? And why should you let yourself be convinced that it is the only one reality when it's just a mask? One of many. Just imagine you have also a mask collection. Why do you return to certain masks? Why do you return to the angry mask? Try to get some flexibility in the matter as some optionality, and then question, because you can question, because no self is blocking the way to question. What am I getting worked up about and why? And can I drop it? I can? Okay, let me drop it instead. I think you can do that categorically without having to think you're losing out on something, unless you still have this concept of self. You find yourself so valuable. You think you've developed into something so skillful that you don't want to let that go, because if you let go of that, you have nothing. So that's understandable, that's normal, but it's not how you get forward. Like, I love just watching people. They'll walk to a rock face that is straight up and down. Maybe, let's say, 3 meters high, 4 meters. Not very high. But that wall is the end of their journey. Very few of them know how to get over that wall. And yet there are skillful climbers, and they're the ones that make it in a skillful way. The others stay on whatever level that they have blocked themselves into, using self, for example. Well, I couldn't possibly be a literary magician. I couldn't possibly be a skier of great talent, because people, some type of mask wouldn't understand how that came to be. So I couldn't possibly entertain the thought of taking that road towards heavenly skill. See, if you can see the conversation between the two dummies of ignorance, then it's a matter of getting beyond the ignorance and taking the path, not just explaining the path. explaining is not knowledge. Practice is without knowledge. You throw a ball and it's supposed to go into a specific place. You're not thinking in the moment that you're creating the physics in a specific way to make that magic happen. Before the arrow hits the mark, it comes from a place. And that place is oftentimes no thinking. When the practice takes over, then it becomes automatic. It's non-thinking. It's non-self. That's it. So, but yeah, vulgar, stupid people, they really can burn up a lot of time and energy, because it is sort of the negative attention whore. That's what it is. So there was the saying, attention whore, negative attention whore. That's like the worst kind. But they are a thing. They exist. The term wouldn't have been invented if it didn't describe a phenomenon that is recurring. But it's really almost more difficult to ignore the attention, the negative attention core, than it is the attention core. I get it. That's normal. That's vulgar, right? It's vulgaris. Hey, there's all these thorn bushes in this ugly patch of vulgarly, commonly grown things that are unpleasant to walk through or stay, unless you can cultivate the stinging barbs out of your life. But it does take time. Sometimes we're thrown into certain societies where that's out of controlness. There's been civilized times and there's been barbaric times. I keep coming back to the Justinian plague. Everyone's like, oh, just, what's that? Like, what? Well, it was really, really worse than you can imagine. And yet our grandfathers and grandmothers made it through that. At least some of ours. Maybe not. Maybe we can just look at it in a symbolic way. Maybe they got through something even worse than the Justinian plague, which is probably something that have happened as well. I think some of the most disturbing things about modern historical awareness is the patches where nothing is being said, or there's dark spots in neighboring countries that should have flourishing cultures but have anarchy instead. In front of digital cameras, in a space age, they got to stay out of plain sight, plain consciousness, so that we don't come to sensible conclusions about how important culture is and how important it is to maintain, protect, and cherish it on every level. Not just the navel-gazing personal level, although that is absolutely a worthy pursuit. These hard, disdainful people that have been strategically wrong for decades now, sometimes it does make sense to get off the gas. Take your foot off the gas if you're driving in the wrong direction. Don't matter how fast you're driving, hey buddy, like you satellite down to you're going the wrong way, you're supposed to go this way. And you know what, maybe the guy doesn't want to go the wrong way. Like he really would like to get the message. And it really would do him a whole lot of good. Not just him, but all the people he's maybe trying to get to bring them something of vital importance, such as how to maintain civilization and to improve it instead of bringing it down, instead of turning a venue into a horrible place to work. We turn it into a great place to work with great people, with great values and great outcomes. Like that's where I'm spending my time. I'm not spending my time in the weed patches, the thorn bushes. I am not blaming people. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying these people are right and these people are wrong. I'm staying out of those types of problems because they're not my problems, because I didn't do anything. I couldn't have done anything to change these types of outcomes. These things are bigger than the individual. You're born at a place on this planet that has close proximity to a beach and tropical conditions, and you name it, good for you. You're in a great place. You probably don't realize how great it is until you were to maybe lose something like that and be put in a brick jungle instead. So I think environments are very important places, not just your individual environment, but why not social environments? Like, why aren't the streets in a perfect condition? Why aren't there flourishing businesses? Why? These are all valid questions, and they have simple solutions oftentimes that aren't as cantankerous or as off-putting or as dangerous or as impossible as perhaps they've been portrayed. Perhaps they're highly achievable and also highly beneficial. I think it's a great concept to have more proposals like that. That we spend more of our time with proposals like that. Even if someone claims it's right but it's wrong, at least it's showing right effort. That one could make proposals like that and not be considered a bad person for right reason. But of course there's a lot of wrong people with wrong reasons, and that's why everything's politicized, because that's basically what keeps things from moving forward. Oh no, we can't do that because then these people won't get what they want, but what's their contribution? Other than the talent to stick their hand out and either ask for something that doesn't belong to them, or then to take it if you won't give it to them voluntarily. Essentially, the impunity mask that we have to deal with in politics. Global, multi-domain impunity masks that are the representatives of their franchise. That means their hierarchy. Think of them as a corporation. That you can't get rid of a president unless the shareholders have a meeting. And if they're not unified on a topic because maybe they're being kept in the dark, then how can things move forward? How couldn't a certain kind of cronyism not develop in places like that? It just required people with impunity to carry it out, and for it not to be reported, or for there not to be any downsides for them. So that creates a massively inverted incentive system that ultimately leads in the destruction of all institutions that allow themselves to be so thusly decapitated. Because that's what it is. It is a substitutionism on a leadership level. New management, same building, different management, completely different condition, completely different profiteers. Before, the entire society profited. Now, 10 people that don't even live in the country. So is that a good development or a bad development? And if it's a bad development, how can we depersonalize the cases of that we have today and just see it as an abstract, philosophical condition that can occur, which has a medical equivalent, like cancer, malignant, parasitical bodies that disable or cripple the well-functioning of the organism. See it as abstract as that. Now some people will say, oh, this is a grotesque comparison. Well, maybe you're too invested in your own little microcosm, but these are about big ideas in big places and unexpected ones, not just the ones you would think. And as with human health, the patient sometimes dies with bad results for the neighbors, because now there's a body that is filled with all different types of things that perhaps are contagious. When they used to catapult dead bodies into cities that were being besieged in Mesopotamia, among other places, they were doing that as a war action to spread pathogens. Spread it in the water. You could get cholera. Spread it in the food. Spread it wherever. They're looking to get rid of the management and the occupants even. Just because it's close to an intersection where trade's happening, they don't need any people out there causing problems. You understand? Like strategic, cold-blooded actions like that. To just have categorized your part of the world as a disposable, and then having caused invested in that side of the historical trajectory game versus neutrality, or how about well-wishing neighbors. But if you're talking about power grabs, what does global power grabbing and having strong neighbors have in common or don't have in common? There's really two models. There's the people that are looking to take over their neighbor's stuff or contest their neighbor's stuff. And there's people not doing that. But you can't really deny that they exist when they do. And then what are the implications of that long-term, strategically, and also financially, socially, economically? Like, who are the ties to these people again? Like, where's the nexus of influence? Because now that we do live in a telescopic world, these connections are there, so they are in play. They have been in play, and they haven't been playing really for mutual benefit, if you come right down to it. And that is a problem. But just imagine there's a company, they have bad management, the management gets exchanged out. They have good management, the company goes back to good management. So that's it. There's no, where's the fury, sound and fury of that happy end? Let's imagine a best case scenario. We don't go down in flames. We don't break up and fall apart. We don't let ourselves be driven nuts. We don't let ourselves be driven into an early grave. We don't let ourselves be overwhelmed with disappointments. But that we achieve that bountiful outcome instead, somewhere on this planet at some time. We don't know exactly where and when or how, but we do want to affirm that possibility not only exists, but is a highly likely outcome when skilled people are put in positions that allow them to make those great changes, those mutually beneficial changes, make those good things happen instead of the bad ones. Now, I want to give all peoples of the world some hope, but many hopes are dashed, and sometimes you don't get the gold medal, even though you're a gold medalist. In fact, it's the exception. It's the exception to be good and to be publicly recognized as a champion and not as a villain or a lout or a fumbler and bumbler as a wayward soul. I keep coming back to these dumb people that think that just because they know that the devil exists, that they can forget about God. Like, go back to the story. There's a connection there. Even the devil cannot keep that from you. But if you won't see it, you're way dumber than people that just believe in God. I always like coming down from an idealistic note, because that is one of my old tendencies, was just to float high off the ground in what I thought was idealistic. And yet how many idealisms have brought their practitioners to skillful conclusions. Not very many, I would reckon, unless they changed their ways, adapted. And if they didn't, you don't make it off the side of a cliff with ignorance, with dogma, and with ideology. So you should look, what is the astroturf in your country? Where is it coming from? Who's pushing it? Is it wise? If it's not, it's bad. And there's bad people doing it. So preposterous people doing preposterous things is their way of social advancement. So, as worldly as you can get, as where the dirt is, that's where they are. These are vulgar people. doing vulgar things. So, but the great thing is you can see the vulgar things and then you can reverse engineer where it's coming from because there is causality. We're living in a highly decision made environment. You want your temperature at 75 degrees instead of 65 degrees. That's possible now. That's really not all that uncommon. But it was 100 years ago. So I think fine-tuned filtering of any kind of telepathic or telescopic, telepathic is a whole different set of things. But let's say telescopic pathogens that are being sent out of the airwaves and have not good outcomes, but you can politicize bad outcomes, and that's what they did. They were like, let's make everybody that's against this genocidal campaign, this genocidal idea, let's make them the bad guys. We're the champion of like this new dynamic social process that leads everybody except us off a cliff. We bail, right? We type thing. If you think of it as an external attack in a civilian or social context, it can happen. These things are not beyond belief, and they have happened in places. So that's what you learn if you're a historian that can also get through the misinformation bubbles that flare up over those types of things happening, because that's part of their combined type of efforts to inform the public about who's doing what and why. Everything else, it just becomes very impenetrably dense with a bureaucracy of affiliated people on the racket. And when it gets dense like that, there's nothing getting through there. Even if something comes up at the top, what are they controlling? They tell somebody to move a coffee machine from one side of the room to the next. There could be a debate about that. And mind you, the people on this level, they're not philosophers or engineers or very valuable people if you look at them from the standpoint of complete objectivity. Like their talent skill isn't in making good things happen for anyone but themselves. And then it's really a question if they're even capable of generating good things for themselves under these conditions that they think are so good for themselves, until it might not be good for themselves because it gets thrown out for some type of dereliction of duty, for example. Somebody, there were 10 fires and the fire truck sitting here, didn't put any of them out. They don't like that type of person showing up. So they might put in a basic effort, but nothing above appearances for sure. So it's not just enough to say the word toxic blob. You need to go into the goo, see what holds it together, what molecules. And then you have to develop a nose for it in the sign of trophying public spaces, train networks, and other scientifically verifiable occurrences if you know what to look for. I like people that know that where the moss is growing on the tree, you can automatically see where north is. I like people like that. What I don't like are big mouths that say that's a lie. Doesn't exist. This is magic. It really isn't. Really isn't. So always depersonalize. It's not about going into the goo and saying, "Oh, this is a person just like me." No, this is someone who's involved in the problem to some degree or another. It's just that they're not going to admit that to themselves. Everyone else is the problem, most likely, as far as they see it. And if their view can be determinate, let's go back to a bad workplace. The boss, the gassed up person that has lost a certain human touch because he's, dealing with humans on a work-related basis, which can be okay. Why does the boss gotta hold your hand? Some bosses are trying to do the right thing, and some dumb knuckleheads don't want to see it like that all the time. And just due to the nature of the enterprise, you can't tolerate knuckleheads in certain instances, on certain days, and in certain places. But of course, you need to be able to do that with skill. And some engineers, you might want to tell them they're fired, but they're irreplaceable, at least in the moment. And so you have to work with people where they are, and that's, all of them aren't even close to near perfect. And leaders, man, you get a lot of just impugnistic people, super vulgar, super negatively selected. It's no wonder the thing falls apart. They're not cut out for that level, but they've airbrushed themselves into it. And so, yeah, that's cultural nuclear bombs going off all the time. Little mini nukes. Boom, 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 when gassed up vulgarians get in leadership positions. Or even worse, coagulate together into a resistant blob. Like a gonorrheic, gangrenous, tenacious, spiked blob that doesn't even, it reacts then to exposure. Like, what? Somebody wrote this about us? Go get them. That type of mentality. They've done it in places like Ecuador. What do you think? How did that happen? There could be so many movies about that. There could be a really long-running series of all the drama involved with that, with really well-dressed actors, very well-funded theater company, and great photography. That thing would be a smashing international success. I mean, you could do it skillfully, even though the things they do are not so skillful. Like Magnum PI, come on. He was skillfully going through all different types of cases. But again, getting attached to aversionary people and things, getting worked up about the blob, that is a level of interaction. So I do recommend the path of a scientist or a yogi, because there's no point in interacting with bad things. And if you have to, it's like putting on a molecular suit. You're interacting with forms and appearances and out of controlness and time, place, things like that, but nothing more than that. There's no spiritual dimension, because this is an added benefit of no self as well. There's no interaction with no self on the level of self. So they're used to being big in that territory, so they'll try to pull you down to this plane of existence that they're on, where they win as the gassed up, blobous person. But with no self, they have nothing to grab onto. But they can form these apparitions of physicality in your vicinity, or telescopically. So, but the telescopic part you can diminish to nothing. Monks walk through cities, they don't look at anything. This is a practice. All of the broken glass, all of the trash, all of the noise, all of the people, all of the busy things doesn't, and if he does, it's very short. He keeps the contact very short. Now, if he comes to a pond full of golden, luminous lotuses, he will sit down and he will have time for that.